Thanks very much, everybody. Nice to have the graveyard slot. I hope you're all surviving. It was actually Antiques Trade Gazette, so although we covered Antiquities, we did everything. And very pleased to see Vernon here today, knowing how much experience he has, and very pleased to hear quite a lot of the things he said, particularly the fact that some Antiquities dealers may be honest, which I'm quite pleased about. Most of all, I actually want to thank you very much, first of all, for inviting us to be here today. It's extremely rare for anyone from the trade to be invited to conferences and seminars and symposiums like this anywhere in the world. Whether or not you agree with what the trade does, buying and selling artifacts, I think it's useful to have a voice in the room. So that's the first thing I would say. I'm not standing here today with a view to any special pleading for the trade. And I am standing here to tell you that what is going on in Iraq and Syria, first from the human perspective, because I don't want to forget that, and then also from the cultural and historical viewpoint, is as abhorrent to members of the Antiquities Dealers Association and other honest dealers and auctioneers as it is to you and everyone else. And that's why we want to bring our knowledge and expertise to bear in fighting this evil. And all we ask of you is that you allow us to do so. I'm very pleased to say that actually people from the trade have now been seconded onto the all-party parliamentary group just referred to. The perception of antiquities dealers as the devil's disciples is a long-held view by many, and it's even now rearing its head in quite a lot of the unfounded accusations of dealers funding Daesh appearing in the media with rather depressing regularity. But before we examine what could be behind these blood antiquities and billion-dollar headlines, I want to talk about not what separates us, but what brings each and every one of us here today together. Principally, we share your desire to see Daesh defeated, the peoples of Syria and Iraq given hope, peace and safety, and to make sure that we neither wittingly nor unwittingly contribute to the funding of terrorist activities. It's been very hard to keep up with the proliferation of conferences, which I mentioned before, and seminars on this subject, as well as all the news stories and newly formed organisations aimed at highlighting real or perceived problems with the antiquities trade. Nonetheless, we have been monitoring the many and varied claims in the media that looted Syrian and Iraqi antiquities are being traded in London, New York and Western Europe. Aside from the Hobby Lobby investigation now underway, centring on, that's in the United States, on around 200 cuneiform tablets, thought to have come out of Iraq illegally, we have yet to see any claims supported by hard evidence, and I think some of the things that Vernon said before me would explain why that may be. We all know and understand the vital importance of provenance when it comes to trading antiquities, but it's also important to apply the same rigour in providing evidence to support claims of wrongdoing because of the people it affects and because of the knock-on effects elsewhere. We are not complacent about the need to be vigilant, nor the need to prevent what looting is taking place, nor how essential it is to prevent trading in trafficked antiquities. However, we need to deal in facts, not propaganda or motivist speculation. We should be able to rely on what the authorities tell us, but it is difficult when even they do not agree. Earlier mention was made of Colonel Matthew Bogdanos from America, whose work protecting the Iraqi National Museum formed the basis of his book Thieves of Baghdad. At a conference held at the Asia Society in New York on September the 24th, he told delegates that so much information was classified, he had to clear what he said in advance, presumably restricting his ability to provide source evidence. He then told the audience, and I quote, "ISIS is making tens of millions, and I'm telling you that this is a low figure that is not exaggerated." However, just 5 days later at the Bureau of Educational Affairs Conflict Antiquities Symposium, Andrew Keller, US Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of Economic and Business Affairs, said, and I quote again, "The US government assesses that ISIL has probably earned several $1 million from antiquity trafficking since mid-2014, but the actual amount is unknown." On October the 28th, an article by Jed Lipinski on NOLA.com, which is the website of the Times-Picayune of New Orleans, profiled Tess Davis, who is Executive Director of the Antiquities Coalition. The the now well-known campaign and lobby organisation described in the article as a Washington-based non-profit that unites experts against global antiquities trafficking. Lipinski writes, the federal government estimates the group, that's Daesh, could be making as much as $100 million a year from smuggled artefacts, many of which may already be entering US ports. So, which is it? Is it Bogdanos's tens of millions, Keller's several millions since mid-2014, or Lipinski's $100 million a year? Maybe it's none of these, because the following day, an October the 29th article on the Washington website, thehill.com, quoted Senator Robert Casey Jr. saying antiquities trafficking from Syria and Iraq is second only to illicit oil sales, which bring in up to $100 million a month. He now plans to introduce a new bill restricting trade in antiquities further on the strength of this. Then we had Mauro Medico, Chief of Section of the Terrorism Prevention Branch of the UN Office of Drugs and Crime, who was at the same symposium and followed Andrew Keller's speech. And he told the gathering, in 2011, my office estimated that the proceeds of transnational crime related to art and cultural property amounted to between $3.4 and $6.3 billion yearly. But that was his office's estimate from 4 years ago of crime related to the entire global art market, of which antiquities is a minute part. So what I'd like to know is how that translates to the $3 billion figure we have heard so oft quoted when it comes to the value of the trade in global antiquities that have been illicitly come by. Later at the same conference, Colonel Bogdanos, when asked who is buying the trafficked antiquities, said, it's a cosy cabal of academics, art historians, dealers, gallery owners, auction houses, museums and private collectors. So I'm afraid even you don't escape this one. But again, no evidence was offered. Now, how many of these people has he prosecuted in his role as Assistant District Attorney? I hear what Vernon says about not being able to discuss the cases, but surely he would be able to give us some figure for that. Certainly, the Hobby Lobby case aside, our monitoring of the media has yet to show up a single arrest, let alone a charge or conviction for a US, British or Western European antiquities dealer on a charge of trading antiquities looted from Syria, Iraq, since Daesh invaded. However, I see daily reports of antiquities dealers and others convicted, or charged or arrested, linked to other areas of the world, such as Thailand. Katie Paul might have an idea. She's the research director of the Antiquities Coalition. In her October the 1st Huffington Post article, she wrote, the American antiquities market is funding the very terror group the US government is seeking to eradicate. And I assume she has evidence of that, although, again, the article offered none. Nor did Senator Casey, who, despite telling Washington's thehills.com that the looted antiquities trade is second only to the up to $100 million a month illicit oil trade, does not know of any specific case of US citizens who have bought stolen artifacts from ISIS, but, quotes, wouldn't be surprised if it is happening. This is a man who is introducing a new law on the strength of his beliefs. Now, I do not quote all the above to be facetious, but to illustrate a fraction of the issue we're dealing with here, and why claims in the media need challenging if they are presented without source evidence. If the US government representatives speaking at conferences within days of each other cannot agree on figures, we have a serious problem. Another US government representative, Robert Hartung from the Bureau of Diplomatic Security, also at the Conflict Antiquities Symposium, announced the Rewards of Justice programme would offer up to $5 million for information leading to the disruption of antiquities sales that benefit Daesh. What he didn't say was that this program applies to oil smuggling as well, and this accounts for hundreds of millions of dollars of ISIS revenue. Now, so far I've highlighted the lack of evidence put forward together with a series of conflicting statistics when it comes to the value of looted and trafficked antiquities. But let's look at what evidence does exist and where it comes from. First of all, the actual size of the art market. The TEFAF art market report from this year, which is the main report giving statistics on the global art market, valued the entire global art market at 51 billion euros. Current research undertaken by the International Association of Dealers in Ancient Art into the legitimate global trade of antiquities estimates its value between 150 and 200 million euros, so 0.4% of the global art and antiques market. Now, how much of that is Syrian? Probably around about 5 to 10%, which would put the value at around 20 million euros at most. Now, I come back to a figure quoted by Major Clark, if I may, just quickly on that, which said that the value of Antiquities Daesh had was about $36 million. Now, that figure has now been challenged by Peter Tompa, who is a lawyer, and he's on the Art and Cultural Heritage Law Committee in the United States. That figure, apparently, he says, is now, it actually refers to the value of all looting from Syria. So I don't know. We have two figures there, but obviously that's what he has to say about it. So common sense tells us that the illicit trade will be smaller than the 20 million euro figure that the IADAA came up with. It's nothing to get complacent about, but it's nowhere near the tens of hundreds of millions of dollars being quoted. Now, all sides in the debate agree that a very significant source of evidence resulted from a US Special Forces raid in Syria in May. Andrew Keller revealed this during his speech referred to above. Now, the raid was at the home of Abu Sayyaf, a high-ranking Daesh officer, and it recovered receipts from his 6-month tenure as head of Daesh's Antiquities division, which is clearly organised. These showed that he collected at least $265,000 in taxes for antiquities, known to be charged at a rate of 20%, which would equate to an antiquities trade of about $1.3 million a month, for a few months, perhaps amounting to $4 million over the course of a year. Neil Brody, he's very well known in your world, I believe, and is a senior research fellow at the Scottish Centre for Crime and Justice Research at the University of Glasgow, someone who's been active for decades as a campaigner for more trade restrictions, has subjected these findings to analysis in his recent article for the European Union National Institutes for Culture. Brody analyses the receipts and confirms the $4 million figure, noting this, quotes, would pay for a lot of antiquities, yet very few have been identified on the destination market. And he's followed by Ben Taub, a US journalist who has dug a little deeper. He's had some of the Arabic on the receipts from that raid translated by Burnett Heichal, a professor of Near Eastern Studies at Princeton and an expert on Daesh. And he says that it is unambiguous these documents urge the excavation teams to extract not only antiquities but also metals and minerals. So what does this $4 million actually refer to? He also notes that the more archaeologically rich western area of Syria remain under the control of the forces loyal to Assad, and points to a further source of evidence showing that antiquities provide just 0.8% of Daesh's income, which, quotes, accords well with the US Department of the Treasury's seemingly low estimation of the antiquities trade's financial importance. Neil Brody goes on to argue that there is an opinion within the archaeological community that highlighting the financial importance to ISIL of the antiquities trade will make it an issue of national security and ensure a strong government response. The danger with this line of reasoning is that the response might be inappropriate, and the ADA endorses this view. Brody also echoes Keller in calling for effective strategies to eliminate demand, and if he demeans the demand for looted and trafficked antiquities, again the ADA backs him all the way. Objects may be appearing in countries bordering Syria, principally Turkey and the Lebanon, as well as on social media, in all probability ending up with those who are not part of the known traditional market. Why do we suspect this? Because we're not seeing anything here in the market in London. There's a great deal of work to be done to identify exactly where looted material is going, but it is clearly not going to the traditional and established market. The types of objects, beads, coins, pottery that we have all seen photos of are generally of the very poor quality or are fake, and are of a type that have been on the market for many decades, and in any event wouldn't go very far to funding a London flat, let alone the world's most notorious terrorist organisation. Of course, the repeated quoting of enormous and patently absurd values of looted antiquities apparently being sold in Europe and elsewhere has a serious consequence, because it will only go to fuel further illegal activity in the Middle East. And for this reason alone, the media and those prompting journalists need to behave responsibly. So what are the trade doing to make sure we do not handle illicit antiquities both now and in the future? Our trade associations have acted collaboratively have actively collaborated with government in this country to address these issues and will continue to do so. We in the ADA are taking action. We have, for instance, completely rewritten our code of conduct with mechanisms in place should a member be found in contravention of the code, and they will be expelled if they break it. We intend to encourage non-trade association members to embrace the tenets of our code of conduct, because there are a lot of those non-members, and we will work hard to ensure that all those who deal in antiquities in the country remain vigilant. You'll be able to read the code in full when we relaunch our website in 2016, as well as much else to improve transparency, clarity and due diligence, such as links to the red list that Vernon mentioned. I have to say here that I was approached by the ADA earlier this year at their instigation with a view to going to advise them. And the first thing I said to them was that their website did not pass muster. They took that on board and they've been very proactive since. So please don't accept what they've got on the website now. It is being relaunched. They're also working very closely with the law enforcement, including Scotland Yard, academics and members of Parliament, to ensure that they are part of the ongoing debate. And our involvement at the ADA is absolutely essential, and we will contribute properly to the debate at the all-party parliamentary group. No other area of the international art market now prizes provenance more than we do. Best of all, provenance now carries a premium at auction, encouraging all concerned to establish it as often as possible. And if objects are being offered well below market value, especially by people you do not know, alarm bells should ring, and any proper professional dealer or auctioneer should know that. However, we too rely on information, and this is rarely forthcoming from source countries. This may be for a number of reasons, but this cannot continue if we are to be effective. The trade's critics, for example, are a little too fond of using the Burkina and Medici archives to beat us over the head with. Give us access to them and we will happily ensure they form a major part of all due diligence. What's needed now is not breastbeating and demonisation of the trade, but new and accurate data that provides better grounds for response. As Neil Brody warns, the response to the Syrian crisis must not be inappropriate. It's for governments and the international organisations to source this information and to pass it to those on the ground, including law enforcement, museums and the trade. But this information must be based on facts and not spin or speculation. Only then can we assess what is actually occurring and make sure we are able to halt or reduce smuggling on the borders of these countries. So how can we in the trade help? There is no doubt that amidst the destruction, illicit material is being squirreled away, as has been suggested. This really worries us, as this material will undoubtedly surface on the open market sooner or later. This could be some years from now. The challenge for us is to make sure we have the correct mechanisms in place to prevent the legitimate trade from handling illicit material and, where possible, identify it and return it if and when it does appear. It is clear that the help of the trade is going to be vital in confronting this problem and will require long-term collaboration. I'm getting a signal to wind up now, so I'm going to do that. We must also find a solution for those antiquities currently circulating in the market, a line drawn in the sand that gives those objects an amnesty so that they can be traded freely. It will make managing the future of antiquities a more achievable goal. If you want to suppress the illicit market, it is imperative to support the legitimate market and to encourage transparency as opposed to fear. I will end there. I had more to say, but I can see that you all want your cup of tea. Thank you very much.